First off, just welcome to Westview's first ever Options in Christian Education Night. Thank you especially to representatives from the different schools that we've got here, and I'll introduce them here in just a couple minutes. Like I had mentioned in communicating about our time here this evening, wanting to start by giving a high-level overview as to why I am convinced that I think Christians ought to pursue an explicitly Christian education for your children, for our children. Now that thesis statement, that Christians ought to provide for, pursue an explicitly Christian education, that might be provocative, that might be assumed as a no-brainer of like, oh yeah, you could kind of be coming from either perspective, I would imagine. And that ought plays a significant role in my mind in that sentence, that there are varying degrees of language, of forcefulness in language. And that ought is an intentional one, that it is not as strong as shall. I don't think it's mandated that you are in sin if you are not explicitly providing an explicit Christian education for your children. So it's not a shall. It's not is appropriate as just a general recommendation, as something that is commendable. It's stronger than that. And it's certainly not may, as just an option that's permissible among many, as though they are all equally valid. So there's intentionality there in the ought, that this is something that I would argue, am arguing, is something that is strongly recommended, and would want to talk more, if you are not persuaded, would want to talk more as to what the reasons are that would motivate you to want to pursue an education for your children that is not explicitly Christian. So to try to keep from talking too long, I'm going to try to stick to my notes and give 4 reasons as to why I think Christians ought to pursue an explicitly Christian education for their children. 4 reasons why, and then 4 quick potential objections that someone might raise. So jumping right into it, the first and most important reason why I think Christians ought to pursue an explicitly Christian education for their children is that Christ is over all. Christ is over all. That is the stated fact of reality. Colossians 1 makes this abundantly clear for us. Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. Good identity statement. For by him all things were created, and in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. That is a factual statement about the fiber of our world that we live in. All things are created by, for, through, unto the Lord Jesus. He is over all things. And so an education that is not making this clear is not dealing with reality as it actually is. You are an education is conveying falsehood if you are not making it crystal clear that Jesus is over all. Because math is not just math. Art, it is not just beauty in the eye of the beholder. History is not just things that have happened. All things are through Christ, in Christ, and unto Christ. And an education that is not making Christ's preeminence clear in all subject matters, that education is training children to understand that Christ is just an optional add-on, that it's just something that you do on Sunday morning, that's just kind of a family tradition or a habit that you are accustomed to. Instead, we should be training our children to understand the very facts of reality, that Christ is over all. And that happens not just by participating in an educational model where there's a prayer at the start of the class and science continues on teaching just as though you were in a secular environment. It doesn't happen just by a weekly chapel service. It's an education that is showing that, yes, all of life is oriented to the lordship of Jesus. So that's first, that Christ is over all. Second, parents have responsibility. This is sobering. We, brothers and sisters, have a responsibility given to us by God to care well for these image bearers. And They are, first and foremost, image bearers. Before they're our children, they are image bearers of God. Think especially here of the responsibility put upon us in Ephesians 6, chapter 6, verse 4. Paul's exhortation, especially, brothers, to us as fathers. Do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. That is the responsibility, especially put on us as men, as fathers, that we need to take the initiative and lead in this work of educating our children. That doesn't mean that we're the primary ones day in and day out providing the education, but we're leading our families as we do in all areas of life to follow Christ in all of life. And this discipline and instruction, as you probably have heard, read, seen other resources, it is much broader than just that Christ is over all. That touches and trickles down in all things. Right? We are following Christ in all of life. There is no area of our lives that is not to be brought into submission to the lordship of Jesus. And as such, our parenting efforts, our responsibility to raise our children in this discipline and instruction of the Lord must bring that to bear in all spheres and aspects of life. Right? This is, I think, what Paul is envisioning is this worldview formation. That flows right out of that Colossians 1 passage. That it's not just, I need to pray and ask Jesus into my heart and now I'm going to heaven and all is good, but that all of life is brought into this orientation of Christ-centeredness. And this is our role primarily as parents. That's our responsibility, that we need to pursue the churches, the schools, the hobbies, the activities, the rhythms, the patterns, the holidays, the traditions, all of these things, we need to pursue them to help our children, leverage all of these things to help our children follow Jesus and know that he is Lord over all. This is long lineage of Christian tradition going back, Deuteronomy 6, the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one, and that overarching reality of life that you can put on par with Colossians 1 is going to have a trickle-down effect into all of life. And that's where Moses goes with it, that you're to provide this instruction, teach them all that God has said in all facets of life. When you rise up and when you lie down, when you're on the way and when you're at home. Every corner facet of life is to be touched by this overarching worldview and framework that Christ is over all. We see in Proverbs 25:1, same Greek word is used in the Greek version of Proverbs as what Paul uses in Ephesians 6:4, just highlighting, I think, for us that this litany of Proverbs that is provided from chapter 25 on, that's touching on all kinds of different facets of life, is this paideia, is this instruction, this worldview formation that a father is providing to his son that we likewise should walk in. Third, I can go faster. Education is formation. This is huge. Education is formation. Listen to Psalm 115. Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory, for the sake of your steadfast love and your faithfulness. Why should the nation say, where is their God? Our God is in the heavens. He does all that he pleases. Their idols, the nations, they are silver and gold, the work of human hands. They have mouths, but do not speak, eyes, but do not see, ears, but do not hear, noses, but do not smell. They have hands, but do not feel, feet, but do not walk, and they do not make a sound in their throat. Those who make them become like them, and so do all who trust in them. This is an idea that I've touched on before, that you become what you behold, whether to restoration or to ruin. And that's what's happening in Psalm 115. That this didn't just happen. The nations didn't just have these idols that they became like deaf, dumb, and mute. They were taught in this. They were instructed in this. They were formed by what it was that was held out to them. And that is what education is doing. You become what you behold, whether to restoration or to ruin. So as you think about how it is that you'll go about educating your children, you've got to be thinking, a primary question is, who are they becoming? Who are they becoming? It's not fundamentally, what's the curriculum, or are they going to test well, or are they going to get a good job, or any other considerations. Who are they becoming? What kind of person are they being formed into? Because their education will shape them. It will form them one way or another. So to that end, consider the reality that public schooling provided by the government, it is not neutral. We can have that conception that that's just a neutral space, and it's kind of tying into what I said earlier, that it's just math. Math is math, whether you pray before math class or you don't. That's a false dichotomy. The education that is being provided by the state is not neutral. And at best, Christ is not proactively opposed in that setting. He's not proactively opposed, but is only explicitly absent all day long. Like, I was trying to think, in best case scenario, the best that public education can provide is that Christ won't be actively opposed and defamed and denounced, but just ignored. And that is forming a child, your child, to be an image bearer that thinks the Creator has no bearing on everyday life. That they're trained from kindergarten through graduating, that they've gone day by day, week by week, being trained in this habit, in this rhythm that God has nothing to do with what I do all day. They're being formed and shaped. Voddie Baucham has a great line where it says, "You can't send kids to Caesar for education and be surprised when they come home as Romans." There is a worldview, there is an agenda, there is an outlook on life that is being presented through all education, because education is formation. Fourth, the math doesn't math. This is the final reason why I think Christians ought to pursue an explicitly Christian education for their children. The math doesn't math. Ephesians 5:15-16. "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil." I think Paul is commending to us to be shrewd and discerning with how we go about our lives and using all that we have, not just our time, but especially our time. And the math doesn't math. If you're sending your kid to school, maybe we'll hear from our homeschoolers, home educators, not sending off to school, the math works there. If you're sending your child off to school 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 30 weeks a year, that's a low estimate. I don't know how many weeks school years are. 30-ish. Right? 1,200 hours per year at school, compared to your children at home with you, explicitly pursuing a Christian formation at church for a couple hours on Sunday, and then family worship, devotions during the rest of the week. I'm estimating 5 hours. Maybe that's low, but you do that for 5 hours for 52 weeks out of the year, you're only at 260 hours in the year. 260 compared to 1,200. The math doesn't math. It doesn't work. You're being out-discipled. That is such a big hill for you to try to overcome through efforts on Sunday morning and in the evenings as a family, if you are not pursuing a Christian education for your children. So in my mind, like, just considering that time factor alone in and of itself is highlighting just how important a Christian education is in the lives of your children. 4 quick objections then as to why family might choose to not pursue this avenue of education, of a Christian education. First and foremost is the cost. That if you're sending children to a Christian school, you're paying tuition on top of paying taxes, tuition for the public schools, and that's hard. It is a burden. And that's where we've invited these school representatives to be here. So talk to them. I would be very confident that all of them would be very desirous to work with you and find some sort of solution or some avenue that would work for your family. And if you don't want to talk to them, talk to me. I would be very happy to talk about ways in which that we could come alongside of you and help make sure that cost is not the decisive factor in preventing you from pursuing a Christian education for your children. Second, there's the argument from mission that wanting to be engaged in the community, in the public schools. And so children are going to go to the public school for the sake of mission and evangelism. But we would not do that in any other setting. We would never imagine sending missionaries to Abu Dhabi who have had zero training, who have had zero experience, zero equipping. Never would we ever, for a moment, think of doing that. So we should not think that our 6, 7, 8-year-olds are going to be well equipped to handle that. There are plenty of other opportunities in the community to engage in the mission, and we absolutely should be engaged in the mission in that way, and even bringing our children along. That is a wonderful opportunity of showing them that Christ is over all. Third objection, aren't the kids going to be sheltered if they just grow up in a Christian bubble with their Christian church on Sundays and Christian school the rest of the week? I'd say, well, there could be. Could be a bubble factor, but that also could be a wonderfully intentional avenue of engagement for children that is not just unfiltered saturation throughout the week. And I was thinking of like an analogy of this shipbuilding. You build a ship on dry docks. You don't build a ship out in the middle of the ocean in a raging storm. You do that in the safety of a harbor. Make sure the ship is seaworthy, and then once it's ready to go, you send it out, and it continues on its intended design and purpose. Fourth potential objection, solidarity. This one maybe is, felt a little bit more tangential, but what Claude suggested to me. Full disclosure. Solidarity, right? It can feel as though it is just like, public education is not good enough for me and my family, and so we're going to withdraw. And we've got the resource and the opportunities to do that. And so in solidarity, we're going to stay with our community, stay with our neighbors. And I appreciate the compassion and the heart that shapes that, the mission mindset that informs that perspective. But kind of like what I've said, there are other opportunities and other ways that you can go about that. And I was thinking especially of Augustine's framework of ordered affections, that is a good thing to value your neighbors, value those who don't have the resources to pursue private education, pay that tuition, or do homeschooling. But in Augustine's framework of these ordered affections, our family takes priority over our neighbor. And that's not a bad thing. Right? Like, I can love lots of women. That's a good thing. I should love lots of women, but I only love that one in a unique way, right? And that's not to say that I hate you other ladies. I do love you. I want what's best for you. But there's no way in which I love you like I love this one, right? Ordered affections. You don't have to hate these other things in order to love what God would have you love. So you have a much higher responsibility to your children than those in the community generally. It's another analogy. You're on the airplane. Right? You got to put your mask on first before you help the person next to you. Likewise, we have to do good for our families if we're going to be doing good for our neighbors.